The Buchan project's really a very pioneering development. There's nothing that exists anywhere else at this scale in the world. So Scotland has this big pipeline of floating offshore wind projects, and we're very much at the forefront of that. So we're a 1 gigawatt project. So that translates to over a million homes that will be supplied with renewable energy. We are located 75 kilometres off the northeast of Scotland, in waters that are 110 metres deep, and we'll deploy up to about 70 turbines producing this homegrown renewable energy.
Hello and welcome back to the Hypercube Podcast. I'm joined today by Clare Lavelle, who is Project Director at Buchan Offshore Wind. Thank you for joining us in sunny Glasgow, and not a joke, it is sunny today. Could you, start by introducing yourself, like your background, both as an engineer, consultant, your kind of road to becoming Project Director?
Great. No, Adam, so nice to meet you, and thanks for having me here today. So Buchan Offshore Wind, we're one of the world's most advanced commercial scale floating offshore wind farms, located 75 kilometres northeast off the coast of Scotland. I'm also a non-executive director of Scottish Renewables, so they are an industry association that are the voice of the renewables industry in Scotland, very much working to position Scotland at the forefront of the global energy transition. In terms of my career history, I'm a mechanical engineer originally. I've worked in the energy industry, predominantly in the renewable sector, for over 20 years and focused mostly on offshore wind, but actually I've been involved in most kind of technology sectors as well. So in networks business, working in onshore wind, hydrogen, wave and tidal, integrated energy systems, a little bit of everything. But I've also worked in lots of diverse organisations in most parts of the sector. So big utility, vertically integrated energy companies, pure play renewable developers, consultancy, technology developers as well. So I've had a very diverse career in the sector.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think like Scottish Renewables, incredible. Some of the events and the kind of outreach stuff that I've been involved in with them have just been really powerful, and it's exciting, I think, to work in renewables in Scotland. It's like it's an exciting place to be. There's definitely a buzz around Edinburgh, Glasgow, and up north about some of the stuff that's going on. Incredible organisation. Mechanical engineering, as a physicist, I always kind of look at mechie and think, I wish I'd done that, because it's a bit more useful than some of the stuff I learned. And I always feel like my hand at like just some of the physics that goes on and the usefulness of mechanical engineering. But like you mentioned it there, like offshore consenting, consultancy, you've worked on this huge breadth of stuff. Like, how does that shape the way you approach leading a project of the scale of Buchan Offshore Wind?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a couple of aspects of that diversity of experience have given me, like a kind of professional one and a personal one as well. So I think from a professional perspective, it's just given me this really well-rounded understanding of all the elements that you need to make a project work. So helps me understand what motivates different organizations that sit in this really complex ecosystem that we have. And I see my current role at the moment as a project director on a developer type organization. I'm kind of like the architect. So it's, we are there at the center of a major infrastructure project. We're bringing together all the capability, all the competency that we need to make project work. And I think there's something really unique about understanding what motivates all those organizations, how you get the best out of them. Like, I've definitely seen examples in the industry where relationships have been more adversarial. So, there's a little bit of a win of getting something over on your supply chain, but actually, we all need to win. So, we need to deliver what government wants. We really need to be able to deliver for consumers, and we have to have a healthy, thriving supply chain of companies that are operating within that system. And, I think all of those different roles have given me this, empathy perspective of what drives people. And so therefore, how do you kind of align all of our objectives to get the most out of people? I would say from a personal perspective, there's been something really great about getting to try all of those different roles and types of organizations, and it's really helped me understand like what I enjoy and what I don't enjoy in the workplace. And somebody talked to me about this really great analogy that's kind of stuck with me around your personal battery. So there's some things that you do in work that really charge you and energize you and you really enjoy. And then there's some stuff that you do in your job that depletes your battery. And every job has got a mix of both. But I think the right job will energize you more than it depletes you. And, and you kind of walk away at the end of the week feeling like you've enjoyed what you're doing and you're happy to go back on Monday again. And I really love what I do. I love the work with Scottish Renewables. I love my current role as well. And I know that's a real privileged place to be.
Yeah. And I totally get that, because there was a thing I read about burnout, and it was like burnout comes from working really hard in something that isn't really aligned to like your soul. It's like you can work hard and be highly rewarded in something that you think you like, but if it doesn't ignite passion within you, then you risk burnout. But like, I work a hell of a lot, like run a business, blah blah blah, and so do loads of people. And there's people that work much harder than me that don't burn out. And it's not like a miracle. It's not some superpower. I just love what I do. I actually love it, and so I like being in the weeds of it. And it's my like hobby and my work. So it's hard to burn me out because I'm getting enjoyment from all the little elements. And there's a lot of ugly stuff you don't want to do, but that comes with it all. The thing you said about from the professional side, like managing supply chain, non-adversarial relationships, like all that empathy. I often think that being a consultant at one point in a career is a bit of a superpower, and it does really lend itself to like the stakeholder jujitsu you've got to do and try to keep people happy. Do you feel there's truth in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what's really interesting about it is it gives you this kind of accelerated experience of different organizations, different projects, like different challenges. And, this kind of, you're often, quite short term. You come in one day, you're given someone approaches you, you're given this complete unique task. You have to go back to first principles, think about everything you've learned from everything you've worked on and how you tackle that and challenge, grasp that challenge and see it through. And I think working with all of these diverse organizations, whether it be governments or, big utilities or small startup tech companies, every day you're engaging with different sorts of organizations that have quite different cultures and motivations. And I think what it makes you really good at is adapting your style and your approach. You can't come in and say, this is my way of doing things. Here's the model. I'm going to apply that here. You've got to work out how your style, your knowledge fits in and can be impactful and effective in these different type of organizations. So I think it takes a lot of emotional intelligence to be able to do that kind of role.
Yeah, we were talking about this just before we started recording, but yeah, the idea that you can get parachuted into a random project, you don't know anything about it, and you've got to hit the ground running and try and understand the business model, I think can help in really complicated environments like Buchan Offshore Wind. But it's also the ability to like think about the other person's incentives, their objectives, their KPIs, and align with them without being manipulative or sleazy. I think is something that you get a lot of reps in consulting, right? Because that's kind of the life, that's it. But rewind a little bit, we've kind of assumed or taken for granted everyone knows what floating offshore wind is. And for maybe the people that are less aligned to this part of the renewables industry, it's a pretty cool, pretty innovative, quite new, weird and wonderful technology. Can you just sort of, yeah, go through explaining floating offshore wind and how it differs and like what makes it so interesting?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, kind of break it down a little bit for you, I guess, in terms of the project itself and why floating wind matters in the energy sector as well. So, the Buchan project's really a very pioneering development. There's nothing that exists anywhere else at this scale in the world. So Scotland has this big pipeline of floating offshore wind projects, and we're very much at the forefront of that. So we're a 1 gigawatt project. So that translates to over a million homes that will be supplied with renewable energy. We are located 75 kilometres off the northeast of Scotland, in waters that are 110 metres deep, and we'll deploy up to about 70 turbines, producing this homegrown renewable energy. We've got a very ambitious but deliverable timeframe, so we hope to be entering construction by the end of this decade and to be operational by the middle of the next decade. And floating offshore wind is a relatively new emerging sector. So there's only, a few hundred megawatts that have been deployed globally, largely in demonstrator pilot scales project sites. So we are taking learnings from that project and making it a commercial scale project. So I think there's not really a kind of single definition of a commercial scale project, but in the fixed bottom sector, typically projects are about 1 gigawatt and above, so about the size of Buchan Offshore Wind.
Wow. So yeah, it's going to be a legitimate, true comp to like a gigawatt commercial scale, like fixed bottom. It's really interesting. And like, I mean, I think you've answered some of this and we'll get into a bit more, but I guess being at the forefront of something this early, like especially in the waters you've talked about, what's the strategic importance for Scotland and the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, I think if we started at a UK level, Scottish and UK government have very ambitious plans for decarbonisation. So, the UK government want to decarbonise the electricity system by 2030, the whole energy system by 2045. So, NESO is estimating that that takes probably about 100 gigawatt of offshore wind to be able to meet that objective. And currently we have 16 gigawatt of operational offshore wind at the moment. So obviously a huge expansion in terms of our deployed capacity. And so to be able to deploy that level of generation, we need to expand out into new development areas and into deeper waters that we currently haven't been able to access by the current fixed bottom technology. It's also got some additional benefits because it allows you to access even windier sites, and windier sites means more electricity produced. But it also allows us to move into deeper waters that are further away from sensitive environmental sites. So it gives us a more deliverable portfolio of projects that we take forward. So that's the context at a UK level. Actually, globally, it's even more important. So by deploying floating offshore wind, we will double our technically viable offshore wind portfolio at a global scale. So there's no scenario where we meet the Paris targets of 1.5 degrees of global warming without significant deployment of floating offshore wind. And for a number of countries, they have no choice other than floating. Their waters are so deep that floating is really the only option that's available to them. So we do need floating to be able to decarbonize. But floating's also about industrial growth as well. So the fact that Scotland's got really an amazing wind resource, we've got these deep waters, we've got a range of ports, but like really critically, we've got all these skills and capabilities that we've had from decades of working in the oil and gas sector as well. So we've got all the ingredients that we need to be able to kind of grow this emerging sector. And just like in the oil and gas sector, where we, off the back of building infrastructure, we built skills and capabilities and they were exported all over the world, we've got the opportunity to do something similar around the floating sector. And I'm definitely keen to talk to you more about it, but we've got some really ambitious supply chain plans, which are around anchoring supply chain capability in Scotland that I'd love to tell you more about. I think maybe just the final bit to talk about is around energy security. And I think we keep getting reminded recently, like, lest we want to forget, but our energy security and our economic security really come hand in hand. So post-pandemic, inflation rises, war in Ukraine, events in the Middle East show us just how vulnerable we are when we rely on energy imports to power our economy. And so we've got this real case for building homegrown renewable resources, so being able to power our energy system through our own resources, but also making sure that we deliver more of the supply chain through local resources and local materials as well. And there's some really unique opportunities that floating has to really create this sovereign energy capability that we're starting to see grow through the renewable sector.
I I love talking about supply chain, especially at this like frontier scale, and just talking about like the fragility in energy security. There was a LinkedIn post. No, I might have this wrong, but there was a LinkedIn post that did a big teardown of effectively how closing the Strait of Hormuz is like an attack on Australia, because they're so dependent. I think it was Australia they were talking about. They were so dependent on imports for energy, and actually the whole system is so complex and so brittle that these kind of secondary, tertiary knock-on effects have all these unforeseen consequences that like local energy supply would help with quite significantly if it was possible. Not necessarily saying that that's the right solution there, but we are, as you said, constantly reminded of how important like that localization of our energy supply and reliance on ourselves can become on supply chain. I think like what my first foray into energy as a postgrad in laser physics, where I did this huge piece on the National Ignition Facility in the States. And if you're a lasers nerd like I was, you find out that neodymium glass was like one of the best, cheapest gain materials for lasers. And the whole supply chain was revolutionized by the fact that they just bought loads of it. Like that was chosen for that facility, and they had to procure so much that it just leveled up the entirety of the supply chain so that it could be done. And we're seeing the same again with like crosslinks, X-links, the big cable. Like if that goes ahead and it goes off and it works, they'll have like quadrupled the global cable capacity for those kinds of cables and stuff. And I think they'll all be manufactured in the UK and things. And again, so we're talking about supply chain again here. You're once again sort of taking a significant step change in scale of floating offshore wind. You must have some really interesting decisions about the supply chain, and you've already down selected the foundation technology. Can you just talk through some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've done something pretty unique as a project. So a couple of things. Like one, we've picked a technology early. We've also picked concrete as a material, which is a little bit novel for the offshore wind sector. And we've also made this very early commitment to manufacturing in Scotland as well. So if I start with the first of those in terms of our technology, so we're using a company called BW Ideol's damping pool technology. So there's a lot of different floating concepts that are in development at the moment, but a very small number of those that have actually been deployed at scale with large scale turbines on top of them. And Ideol's damping pool has a long operational history. They've had projects in the water in France and Japan, operating since 2018. So it's a really proven, really demonstrated, robust technology. And actually for us, building a commercial scale project when we're looking at billions of pounds worth of investment, it's really critical that we have something that is investable, that's insurable as well. Alongside our projects, our project partner BW Ideol are working actively to establish a manufacturing facility at the port of Ardersier at Ardersier Energy Transition Facility. So it was an old oil and gas fabrication yard that's been that was mothballed and is really seeing a renaissance through the renewables industry. So it's an amazing facility that we are building the capabilities back up again to serve the renewables sector. So that investment, it's about £200 million investment, and we'll see 1,300 jobs located in the port alone. So just associated with the facility. I think maybe just the final bit to talk about is concrete and why concrete. So steel has been the material of choice for the fixed bottom sector, but actually manufacturing in Scotland and manufacturing with concrete means that we can increase the material supply that we use from the local Scottish economy. So we can use materials that we have, but we can also leverage a lot of the existing capability that we have from our civil engineering industry. So, we're not talking about building up a new capability that where the UK aren't competing already. We're talking about leveraging the skills that we've got. So I think back to my comment on energy security, it's about shortening those supply chains and making sure that we're maximizing the use of what we have locally. And we're doing that because we think it's the right economic solution. So we're convinced that being able to fabricate using the local supply chain and the local ports and using this technology that integrates well locally, we're convinced that that's the lowest cost option, but also happily it's the thing that drives the most job creation as well. And this will be a really significant step change in terms of UK content. So we have had very limited UK delivery of foundation for the fixed bottom sector, and the foundation cost is one of our most significant capital contributions in the project. So it'll be a real step change in terms of economic delivery from a renewable project, which will be very exciting.
I just think it's amazing. And it just always then reminds me of like the kind of circular economy diagrams you see about like trying to keep things in the local ecosystem and the knock-on effects that it has. Like for emerging industries, there's always that chicken and egg problem around like, well, you need a supply chain to do the thing, but the suppliers need bankable projects to be able to exist in the first place. And you're talking about the level of investment that can just really kickstart that kind of engine, and you just like tread the path for others to have an easier ride of going sort of down the same road later on, and hopefully then the whole industry becomes more efficient. Like, how's that playing out in floating offshore wind?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think it's always helpful to look to the fixed bottom sector, right, and the parallels of how that evolved. And like I will say on behalf of the renewables industry, it's a real success story, right? So I think there's recent research by UCL that suggests that we've saved 100 billion on electricity costs since 2010 by reducing our reliance on gas imports. And it's a sector that's very buoyant. We currently employ 30,000 people. We've got a really buoyant supply chain. So we have delivered a lot for the UK economy. But I think arguably we could have done more to anchor some of that supply chain opportunity. And I think floating gives us this opportunity to kind of push the envelope a little bit further. I think a lot of the challenges for fixed have been around the contract for different process. So it very much incentivizes you to deliver the lowest cost solution, regardless of the economic benefit. But I think the other challenge has been that you get a very short time frame from securing a contract for difference and actually having to make an investment decision. So it doesn't really give you the time to be able to build up the supply chain that you need to. And I think what we're doing is quite different. Most projects are procuring from an existing supply chain, an existing fabrication facility, an existing turbine supplier. So, they've got the certainty of knowing that when they place the contract, it's a facility that's up there and running and operational. And we have this really tricky challenge of, we develop the projects, we're investing in it, we're working towards ensuring that we've got something that the government will consent and will there's a route to market through contract for difference. And we have BW Ideol doing the same thing at the same time with the fabrication facility, and these two processes have to work hand in hand. And like definitely the approach that we've taken around making this early decision and making this commitment, I think that's the thing that is catalyzing this opportunity. I think we think it is the right thing to do in this kind of new emerging sector. It's definitely the thing you do to need to be able to realize that opportunity. But I think the benefit of the project like this is it becomes an anchor for that investment. And then what you hope to see is that, you know, that's a facility that actually has a long-term legacy and kind of supports a growing sector as well.
Yeah, it's like, because investors love uncertainty, right? And someone has to really make a bold step and trailblaze a bit and commit to a thing. But as soon as one organization like Buchan can do that, it just makes other people's investment decisions easier because there's some certainty somewhere in the system, and then that cascades out into the knock-on effects of it all growing together and things. So it's a big like risk to take, and it's inspirational. Like, it's inspirational that yeah, you're doing it and like making such a big commitment, because you can totally see how it plays out down the line and how like all the benefits come off the other end of it. I guess we've talked a lot about the industry as a whole. What about just in general delivering projects? Like for you and for your experience, what happens between consent and first power that people often underestimate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really exciting time for the project. It's a time when things start to get really real, is what I would say. So someone talked to me recently about this kind of analogy in big infrastructure projects when you move from cooking to baking, right? So like I think the analogy being that in the early stage of projects, you know, you're adding ingredients, but you can reverse and change, and you know, there's kind of no set outcome. Whereas when you start baking, you make a decision, you put it in the oven, and you've like locked things down, and there's no returning, right? And so a lot happens in the early stage of development. The market's changing around you and you're changing and adapting. But I think from, you know, the point of consent to reaching financial investment decision, you start locking down a lot of your design decisions. Like we've made one key decision, but there's a whole lot of extra things that we have to make around that. And you start locking down your supply chain relationships, and you really like move forward towards the point where, you know, everything comes in place, all of the design decisions and the financing and funding and everything that sits around that. I think what's particularly interesting about floating offshore wind is there isn't really an established playbook from, you know, there's quite a well-trodden path now in the fixed sector of how you get from consent to investment decisions. But I think it would be wrong to assume that that's the right thing to do for a novel market. And I think there's a mistake in saying, well, we're just going to do what the fixed bottom sector do now because they're a novel sector. But alternatively, you could say, well, we'll do what the fixed bottom sector did when they were immature. And actually, I think a really important thing is going back to first principles and, you know, working out what the strategy that fits with the sector and the market as it is at the moment. So, you know, that's really the really naughty problem that we're addressing at the moment.
I mean, like, it's probably a daft question, but I just think it sounds so exciting and interesting. It begs the question, like, how do you get a job, or what drew you into this specifically? Was it the fact that it was like innovative and something new and undefined?
Yeah, definitely. Like I haven't worked in different parts of the sector. I've worked in the networks business, which are very mature. You know, it's about stewardship of an asset. And I worked in wave and tidal, which is the absolute other end of the spectrum, like very immature, you know, like very much around trying to get over that valley of death of, you know, getting demonstrators that are working that you can start getting down the cost reduction pathway. And I've really loved that kind of sweet spot of industrialization. So kind of taking new things and getting to the point where they're commercial. So I was involved in the fixed bottom wind sector in kind of the early days, and hydrogen sector as well. That's kind of approaching that bit, but there's something about that place of I don't think of the patience for long innovation cycles. They take a really long time in the energy sector, and I don't think I love being in the mature industries where everyone knows what they're doing and they're just recycling the thing that they've done before. It's this kind of creative middle where you can make projects really serious. That's kind of really really appealed to me. So
I did an engineering doctorate, and you were called a research engineer, and I always loved the way they sold it, because it was like, it's exactly that. Like, you're taking stuff that works but repurposing it or making it more efficient or applying it to new novel concepts to make it commercialized and like deriving value from it. And there's a lot of like analogs there of like, all the pieces work on their own somewhere, but how do you bring it all together into this novel technology at a scale that hasn't been seen, that is like a different flavor of innovation? I think people often like confuse innovation with like new technology and that's it. Actually, like, different type of project or financial products like are all types of an innovation that I don't think get enough of the limelight for this scale of stuff. And actually, like, it can be some of the most important elements of what you're doing, like investing in the supply chain and all that actually could be as significant as some of the main deliverables from the project when you look at the 30-year outcome and so on and so forth. I guess, like, at the scale you're working, you must have a good like vision of risk management and coordination. How does that play out? And how much of that can you digitize, and like, where do analytics make a difference versus just being theatre?
yeah, I mean, I I think that wider risk question around the floating sector, and particularly when you're talking about commercialization of projects, it's actually a lot driven by kind of investor appetite, insurer appetite, that kind of set the threshold for acceptable risk. And like a lot of what we do, it might seem very innovative, but actually, when we take a technology that actually has had a decade worth of demonstration, cumulatively a lot more, we're taking a kind of core technology that's actually kind of at the right point in its cycle to be at this scale. But a lot of what we do across the rest of the project is minimize other risks. So make sure that, the risk profile of the project as a whole is acceptable. And, so we don't seek to innovate absolutely everywhere we can because we're an innovation project. We seek to make sure that we develop the project in a way that's kind of low risk and well packaged. And we've managed all of it, like whether it's technology risks or commercial risks, or that they're all, have been addressed reasonably comprehensively. I think that digitization, data-driven element of that probably isn't that different for floating, I think, than it is for the fixed sector, in that, we still have the same set of challenges around major project development. So we've got life cycles of projects that are really long. So someone started bidding on the lease of this project, I think probably about 2019, and the lease was secured in 2022, and we won't see construction commence till the end of the decade. It will be operational in 2035. It's maybe got 30 plus years beyond of operational history. And so there's a really interesting challenge around how you manage the integrity of that data through the life cycle. But then I think you end up overwhelmed with information, but you don't have insight. So how do you take all of this information and help people make good decisions at the right time? And so, in offshore wind projects, I think you see like information management systems. They're kind of the groundwork of collecting data and having it an environment where people can collaborate and use it. But then how does that be fit for purpose for decades worth of use and adaptable enough? And yeah, it's a really interesting nitty challenge that I don't see it as being, I think it's an offshore wind industry challenge and an energy asset challenge. It's the parallels are very similar, I think, in all of the different sectors.
I 100% agree. And I think like even in the small organizations that we've worked with, like it's prevalent everywhere. Tech, like software tech, I think has done a terrible, terrible job of this in the dual problem of like, oh, here's the shiny new tool. What you used to do, get rid of that. This is the new way of doing it. Here's the new technology. Because like the software progresses at such an alarming rate every 2 or 3 years. It's just a totally different way of doing things. And a lot of like young, hungry techies really want to play with that new thing. And so people will turn their nose up at like technologies that were in vogue 10 years ago. But on the scale of the project you're talking about, like we joke that like every offshore wind project I've ever spoken to, it's like we've got 20 years and not a day to spare. Like it's really intense, but a long time frame. And then the other problem that I think tech does is very like pontificate from the ivory tower, like this is, oh no, you need to do this and you need this kind of data warehouse and this is the way you do it. And so you trust the techies that bring all these solutions in, but they never really go, that's the bit they cared about. And they never really go that last step of going, and here's all the value that delivers. And that's how you reap the benefits. Like you've built this lovely farm and here's all the food you can eat. Like they just go, right, we've built a really good farm. Excellent. Let's build a new one because a new way of doing it over here. And I think that plays out to be where we are today, where we're at the peak of this mental hype cycle around AI. Now everything's got to be AI. Everything's AI. What does that mean? Like for me at my desk, developing a wind project, I don't understand it, so I won't do it. And you end up with the human as system integrator, or AI as like artificial intelligence, where it's just people with spreadsheets and on the phone. And because it's too hard because no one's really invested the time in it. And I would say this because I mean, this is my business, right? But if you then look at the asymmetry in investment between the hardware and the infrastructure, the thing that you're building, and then the sort of software technology investment is bonkers. But no wonder, because no one's showing the value of what another percentage point of investment on the soft stuff does. Like where does that play out? So we just leave it. But if you could crack that nut, you get into like learning across projects, sharing distributed efficiencies around risk management, analytics and things. Like how many of the same dashboard have been independently developed across the wind industry in the last 20 years by some really talented person that probably only ever saw one project in their career. Like, and I think it's just a shame that's it's there. It's another layer of efficiency we could all go after. It would ultimately drive all the costs down. It's just too hard for a lot of people, and it's not front of mind because again, doing your job, you've got like 100 other things at the top of the priority list to actually get on with, and there's no one really showing you the path of, well, you take step A and step B, and then you reap benefits C and D very quickly. And something we're looking to tackle, but yeah, it's a thing that, that's me off my soapbox, I'll shut up. But that's I think something we see everywhere. And I do agree with you. It's not just a floating offshore wind. It's not just a wind. It's a whole energy system thing.
Yeah. I think there's something really interesting about, like that, this idea that AI is going to come and take all of our jobs, and like actually the challenge in the sector is we need to deliver such a vast amount of infrastructure and projects in such a short period of time, and that there's this kind of existential imperative on delivering all of that. And projects take too long, they take too long to develop, they take too long to deliver, we're not as efficient as we could be. And so there's not a competition for effort. Actually, I think what I need is, I've got these really talented experts in my team. I need to free up more of their time to be able to make really important decisions and be able to drive projects through more rapidly. So it's such an opportunity for us. I do see the challenge in, often we're selling solutions, like looking for problems. And I think some of the magic happens when you have the people that kind of bridge the gap between, I've got a team of like technical specialists, whether they're engineers or commercial people or lawyers or environmental experts. And then you have, data scientists and people that have this kind of deep domain technical knowledge. But the people that are, and I definitely saw it in consultancy, that put a foot in both camps. So I really understand what your problem is. I really understand how I can solve that. And, we see outcomes that are like project driven rather than here's a capability. How do I work out how I transition that capability to a bunch of people that don't understand and don't need. And so, yeah, it's that's I think where, we need more people that can kind of bridge that gap.
I didn't even have to pay you to say that. That's brilliant. That's totally, that was the thesis behind Hypercube from day one. Exactly what you just said. Every project I'd ever been on as a data scientist that was successful was led by someone that was a domain expert first, that happened to know a bit of data science. And all the ones that were led by the best techies, the best data scientists that were working in something they'd never seen before, they were okay, and they did okay, but they were just, you would run rings around people having domain knowledge.
Yeah.
Hypercube was birthed out of the idea that can we obsess about one domain very deeply, never do retail, never do pharma, never do whatever, just do this so that we can bring some of that domain knowledge with us. And probably didn't fully appreciate just how vast that domain knowledge is, how hard it was to acquire all of it, but we're getting there. Grid access and transmission, like wider system topics that are raised. What's your view on them, and how do they affect what you're up to day to day, and things going on in Scotland?
Yeah, I mean, a big one to talk about in Scotland is always transmission charging. So for sure, and projects in the north of Scotland, they're at a significant disadvantage. There's a disproportionately high charging regime, from the north of Scotland down to the south of England. We, and I think the challenge of in a strategically planned energy system where government have made strategic choices about where to locate generation, and when we're moving towards more and more strategic planning through NESO, through the Strategic Spatial Energy Plan, it's hard to see why locational signals play a role, because actually what they do is disincentivize investment. And I think for us, the risk is that they undermine this economic opportunity. So, this kind of, I talked about the 1,300 jobs in the port alone, but the projects across the board, we're looking at 2,900 jobs in Scotland, 900 million investment contribution to the Scottish economy. So that really is at risk at the moment from transmission charging. So a significant challenge. I also definitely don't think it's delivering for consumers. There's much more efficient ways of representing the cost of transmission charging in bills than we do currently at the moment. So opportunities to reform, and obviously there's a lot of work underway by government in terms of reform national pricing that we hope to see some movement on that side. I think more broadly, I mean, it's been like such a moving feast, right? And it's been a time of like really big change and really necessary change, I think, as well. So, we had a system that just wasn't working, a grid queue that was like monstrous and, absolutely didn't meet the demand. And I think that we're long overdue a strategic plan. We knew what the end goal was, but we didn't really understand how we were going to get there. So I think a lot that's happening in grid reform and in market reform is really positive. But I think the challenge is not distracting delivery, not impacting investor confidence, like making sure that we've got this like laser sharp focus on delivery. We need to build so much grid infrastructure in such a short period of time, but it's absolutely critical to projects. So putting all our efforts behind that. So
just a few small topics.
yeah.
No, and it's again, I kind of always end up saying the same thing, but like it is frustrating. And this stuff does take time because you're trying to move so many stakeholders, there's so many vested interests, like you will upset someone somewhere, no matter what you do. And that always adds up to lots of community and discussion and like forums and consultations. And yeah, you can see the kind of pros and cons of just picking a direction and going for it versus trying to find out what the outcome is. I do think it's getting better though, from like where we were a few years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the two sides of that coin, right, is what the industry engagement, and I think grid reform was always going to have winners and losers, right? And I think that you could argue about the process and the approach and the outcomes, but it was necessary to do, and I think it's helpful. It gives people, it gives the market more certainty. It's still too slow, and we still see extensions and outcomes. We know that we have a gate 2 process, so we know we've got our place in the queue, but we're still waiting for that final agreement to come through. So these are like absolutely critical bits. Knowing that you've got your grid connection all signed and agreed, and that it's going to be delivered and turned up on time is absolutely critical in terms of investor certainty. So I think that's the industry side. I think there's the wider engagement with the communities that we're in, and understanding the need for net zero, and understanding why grid is this really critical infrastructure. I'm not sure that we've between industry and government we've really explained that clearly enough. And I actually think part of that is projects like ours that are delivering these economic benefits. I think it's an easier story when you link economic prosperity to grid infrastructure, and it will impact people. It is a change, and so I think there's more that we can do to be able to talk about that story. And I actually think we need more support from government in terms it's like, of course we speak to people and we engage, but that there's a need for this infrastructure, and I think we have to talk about that quite strongly.
I think like that always reminds me of when you hear people that aren't like energy nerds like talk about energy or renewables or the standing charge on their bill, and like it kind of wakes me up to remember that most of the people I speak to are submerged in energy all the time, so we all kind of get this and understand it. But there is such a huge gap, and then you get asked like, "Oh, what does this mean?" And you go, well, once there were dinosaurs, and like you end up sort of trying to explain like the whole universe because it's just so complicated and hard to do. But I think you're totally right. Like meet people where they are, communicating language and terms that is visceral to them. They really get jobs is a great one. And I guess like community, we've talked a lot about job creation. Community and workforce investment is like a real pillar of what you're doing. Are there any like local stories or things you want to share that maybe we've not covered?
Yeah, I mean, like the journey that you have with a local community, you have this like really long-term, really, a generational relationship with a community when you build an infrastructure project like that. And so we have a 20-kilometer onshore grid connection route. So we come onshore at Rattray Head and go 20 kilometers south and connect with an underground cable and connect to an existing substation in Peterhead. And a lot of the work of the last 4 years has been working really closely with those communities and helping them. I think this is where you can do really good work, which is kind of take feedback and, understand, get all of that local context and be able to kind of adapt your plans and designs to be able to integrate those. So we've done a lot of good work on that front, and we're expecting our onshore planning imminently, which I think kind of attests to the good work that the team have done there. We do a lot of, just working with local communities. So at the moment, we're funding a really great pilot project with Peterhead Football Club Community Foundation. We pay for a Peterhead football coach, Danny Strachan. He goes into the local schools and coaches kids that were having they were having challenges post-COVID with school attendance and getting people back into schools. And he does like sporting coaching, but actually does some one-to-one coaching with kids in my classroom as well. And it's had this really significant impact in terms of schools attendance as well. So it's been really nice to be part of. So I think that's like your relationship with the community. I think the thing that you kind of talked about at the outset, the really important bit is that job creation, skills building, economic activity. And a lot of what we've done has actually been focused on the schools engagement because, it's 10 years to get to the point where you're constructing a project. You've got someone's whole career, maybe like 30, 40 years worth of an operational asset. So, there's a really long-term legacy of kind of economic opportunity in terms of operation and maintenance. So we've been working with primary school children and secondary school children through the University of Highlands and Islands and NESCOL and Powering Futures around upskilling kids and getting them giving them the confidence they need to be able to enter that workforce. So that's been really great. And I think the next set of focus will be very much on like building up the capabilities that we need for the local fabrication facility. And that's about taking this kind of civil engineering capability that we've got and being able to kind of expand that workforce. And I think particularly the nice thing about floating is it uses a lot of the common skills that the oil and gas sector has. So obviously fixed bottom did anyway, but floating has got even more parallels to oil and gas because it's got things that float and are flexible. And so leveraging in all of those skills as well. So a lot of really good work that we're doing, and actually that the industry and Scottish Renewables are doing in terms of working with government and all of those agencies to get that workforce ready.
I mean, like being the person or the team that gets to orchestrate, enact and deliver that, like that bit, that has to be up there with one of the most rewarding jobs. Like you're contributing to a green energy project, you're contributing to real jobs, like skills, like that's got to be pretty tip top for work satisfaction kind of like KPI. Like if they ever need anyone, I'd love to do that kind of stuff. I guess bigger picture, what does success look like for Scottish floating wind jobs, manufacturing, like capability? What does success look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think like touching on just what you were saying before, like I see that a lot of people that are involved in the renewable sector, they're there because it's a very values driven industry, right? People care about the outcomes and like we're building businesses and we've got to be able to have prosperity and be able to keep people gainfully employed. But actually I think a lot of people are driven by the outcomes. And I think for me, what you just talked about, what kind of keeps me going in this project is that idea that we'll have this new manufacturing facility, this new supply chain capability that'll be a legacy. And so like we did our new office opening a few weeks ago where we're growing the team and capability that we've got to move into this next stage towards financial investment decision. But hopefully by the end of the decade, we'll be doing groundbreaking on a new manufacturing facility. And so the idea of seeing concrete foundations coming down a slipway and going off into the North Sea that are being built by a UK workforce and kind of leveraging on all of those local skills, like that's like very much what drives me from a personal perspective. And I think if that is an achievement, it's I don't think you can ask for more than
Yeah,
that. So,
that's cool. A great way to spend a career, I think.
yeah.
Lovely. Yeah. Oh, very cool. Okay, last few, like key milestones over the next few years. Any external factors that need to align, or any stars or big bets that need to pay out?
Yeah, I mean, it's all gonna come off at the right time. So, like for us, we're waiting on our consent determination onshore and offshore. So we hope to get our onshore through reasonably imminently and offshore by the end of the year. And so at the moment, we're very much focused on feed engineering, so our front end engineering design. We're hoping that we will be eligible for CFD by 2027 and that means an investment decision by 2029. We'll first export to the grid from 2033 and then full export from 2035. So it's, and we need all to come together. So we need transmission charging addressed. We need to see the CFD mechanism come ahead with appropriately ambitious budgets to be able to deliver projects. We need grid to come and happen on time. We need our consent to be through. So all of that has to happen to be able to kind of realize this project. But we're well on track, and we're very confidently pushing forward and making it happen.
I mean, ambitious and a lot of big stuff there, but nothing bonkers. Like you're not asking for like the sky to turn green or whatever. Like it's stuff that directionally, yeah, there'll be niggles and there'll be humps in the road, but directionally, my bet would be on all the best of luck to you and it happening, right? Not to jinx it, but I guess before we let anyone go, I always like to ask a couple of questions. Any hot takes, any controversial thoughts and opinions, any feathers to ruffle, or any heard it here first?
Oh, I think so. I've got a bit of a floating offshore wind off topic hot take to go.
It's Joe.
A little bit dangerous, but
We can edit this out.
yeah, you might want to. So yeah, I actually like, interestingly, controversially think that AI, and like, it's clearly an opportunity for the sector, but I think it offers there's a threat there as well. So there are currently 50 gigawatts worth of data centers that are in the demand queue at the moment. So the UK's peak electricity demand is 45 gigawatts. So we're talking about doubling our electricity demand. And I do have concerns that there's a bit of an infrastructure bubble, that, we've got a bit of hype around the valuations of these tech companies, and there's a rush to build the infrastructure to be able to serve them. I think probably we haven't got the like, AI is inevitable, will grow, that need will grow, but I'm, the kind of world where we AI does everything and we don't have jobs for anyone anymore. I think that is probably that's not a realistic outcome, and I think our infrastructure growth is probably not matching that ultimate design. And I actually think the risk for renewables is around like footless capital. Like, data centers are shorter development cycles. They can quite easily, we need a lot of capital to be able to build our renewables projects, and there's a risk that it's finite and it gets diverted to that infrastructure. I think located in the wrong places, they can be, drive up the demand for gas in the short term. So I think there's a risk that they put the transition back. And again, it comes down to strategic planning. So we have been very bad in the UK of, developing strategic plans and really understanding where should generation go, what changes in demand shift, where do we build the networks. We kind of chaotically let the market decide, and the market hasn't always made good decisions. So I do see that data centers could provide some really good synergy, co-located with renewables and placed in the right locations in a very planned way with a kind of clear understanding of what the need is. But if we don't take a step back and do some more planning sooner rather than later, we've got a risk that, that we end up taking a few steps backward before we take a step forward. And I don't think we can afford to do that in the transition. We are running out of time, and to do the right things in the right way.
Oh, it's a good one. It's a good one. I agree. I think we're already seeing some of that play out in pockets, in like here and there around the world. I think we're in an AI hype bubble. I think it will burst, but I think the demand will increase for data centers will just carry us anyway. Regardless, we'll get a settling out, but eventually arrive at this point again, like in a more realistic time frame. There are no good solutions. There's no real answer. Like, just because you can build a load of data centers 10 times faster doesn't mean you should. But the people that are doing that might not care. So
yeah, and I think there's a role for government, right? In terms of kind of like it's we ended up in a mess with the grid queue on generation, and I think we'll be set back if we end up in the same, trying to tackle the demand challenge as well. So I think there are levers that government can play to kind of make sure that that's managed.
Yeah. And like some of the scale of some of these things are like in the hundreds of megawatts, these data centers, and they like can swing sort of 20% like up and down within very, very short time frames. Like scary numbers for the grid
Absolutely.
to look at. And well, yeah, I'm keen to see how that plays out.
And Scotland has plenty of renewable electricity to supply them, so it's there is a real opportunity in terms of strategically located demand, but I think it has to be strategically located.
That thing we talked like an incredible podcast with Giles from Apertura, and they're looking at co-location of storage assets, data centers. Like, what is the opportunity in Scotland? How do you do exactly that? Really interesting episode if people want to check it out. Quite old now, but fascinating company, and yeah, someone trying to tackle that side of the problem. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before I let anyone leave, I always just like to check if there's anything you'd like to plug or promote, or if anyone in the audience wants to find out more about you or Buchan Offshore Wind, where should we send them?
Yeah, I think probably the best place is to follow us on LinkedIn. So that's like absolutely keeping up to date with all the project news as well. We're recruiting at the moment as well. So all those roles are up in LinkedIn. So I think that's the best place to keep up with all the news.
Amazing. What, like 2,500 jobs on LinkedIn, is it? Or...
just a few at the moment, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
Well, look, absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, wish you all the best. We'll have to catch up in a couple of years and see how it's all playing out.
See it. No, I look forward to the follow-up.
Thanks. Thank you once again for listening to the Hypercube Energy Podcast. As always, if you have any feedback or comments, or you want to get involved, please get in touch. And if you want to find out more about what's happening in data and AI across the energy sector, please join the Beyond Energy community. And I look forward to speaking to you soon.